Hello and welcome back to my garden. My name is Abby and in this video I'm going to be documenting a whole summer season in my garden. In the spring season, I had harvested my garlic, I was harvesting a lot of flowers, and I had also experienced the aphid infestation. Summer is a stunning season. There are a lot of flowers, there are a lot of harvests, but there is also quite a bit of maintenance depending on what you will be growing. I had a lot of blooms. It was just blooms everywhere I turned. I didn't really have a color scheme, but there were blooms growing from the rose I'd planted. I had violas, I had dahlias, I had daisies, lavender. I had a couple of other plants that I would like to talk about more in depth. The first one is my chrysanthemums. So I grew these from seed back in March and I planted them out. They looked really good. Even before they bloomed, they looked very interesting, rather fluffy. This was my first time growing them, so I was really enjoying every step of the process. All in all, I ended up with just one bloom, but it was absolutely stunning. It had pinks, yellows, and I think a reddy color. I can't remember exactly what the name was. If I can find it somewhere, I'll put it on the screen. But I was just imagining a whole section of the garden with these flowers. I think it would be just simply beautiful. Another mention is for sweet peas. This was again my first time growing these as well. Most of them had been eaten by the slugs and snails, but I had about 8 that survived. So I put 4 in one container and 4 in another container, and they generally looked okay. Sweet peas have got the most amazing scent. I remember walking past them and then there was just an amazing scent. So I would definitely recommend growing them if you want to have more fragrance in your garden. The only thing to say about sweet peas is you really need to stay on top of picking them because they do bloom quite a lot, and if you don't pick the flowers then they'll end up going to seed, which means you may only have blooms for a short period of time. So I would say they need to be picked, I think, almost daily. When I was doing it, I think I was picking the flowers daily. So yeah, that's another thing to mention. Speaking of fragrance, lavender. I had lavender growing and it was just such an attraction for the pollinators, in particular the bumblebees. Any time of the day they would be there, well, except for night times, but during the day they would be all over it, and as soon as it was sunrise they'll be back out again. So yes, loads of blooms for July. I also had harvests in this early part of summer. I was harvesting my onions. I was eating from the garlic that I'd harvested earlier. And I was also harvesting potatoes. So with potatoes, you can dig and get potatoes without pulling up the whole plant. So that's what I was doing. So especially for salads. So when I needed a salad, or maybe some potatoes for lunch, I was digging around and getting them. But I did do a bit of a bigger harvest on the 22nd of July. They were quite big. They were actually big enough that I ended up having some jacket potatoes. I did notice some tubers growing on the stems of my potatoes. I looked it up at the time and found out that they are called aerial tubers and they grow on a plant when the plant is under stress. So I did inspect my plants at that time and identified that one of the stems was twisted and slightly broken. So I ended up digging up that particular part of the plant and I harvested the potatoes that were connected to it, and going forward from there were no more tubers. Lavender likes loose soil and a lot of sun. I know this because I planted some lavender in containers and it was absolutely doing well and growing upright and it looked very healthy. However, I had also planted three lavenders towards the house because my thinking at the time was that the fragrance, I would smell the fragrance from the house and it would be wonderful. Really good plan, but it turned out that planting my lavender close to the house was not the best place for the lavender because, as I mentioned, lavender likes a lot of sun and it does like that loose soil. I have clay soil, and towards the house where I'd planted it, I get under about 4 or 5 hours of sun in the height of summer. So what ended up happening was my lavender was leaning towards more light. It was not doing well at all. The bumblebees still loved it, but it was not doing well at all. Another plant that was not doing very well in the garden was my hebe. So I planted three hebes in the ground. My plan had been to create a garden bed that would go across the lawn. I thought that would be good to mark the vegetable garden away from the front of the house. But then I decided against it partly because of the digging. The idea of digging just put me off it. I've got clay soil, and I know I keep mentioning it, but it's really, really like concrete. The idea of digging it is just, yeah, no. So, anyway, I'd planted three of them in the ground, and I had nicknamed them my trip hazards because if not looking, it was very easy to trip over them. And I suspect that's probably what happened a few too many times with one of them. So it wasn't doing well at all. I did try to add a bit of compost to water it, it ended up dying back. Apart from the lavender and the hebe, most of the other plants were doing very well. My peonies had stopped blooming, but the foliage was looking green and luscious. My geraniums were also blooming at this time, which was good to see. My rose was having its second flush of blooms, and in the towards the blueberries, I had some pumpkins. So I had interplanted my pumpkins and some sweet corn and even some tomatoes in the side border. And I did this in June, early June. So it's part of the spring season. Quite a few things were eaten by slugs and snails because if you remember, it was a very wet spring, but some things did remain. So I still had tomatoes and three sweet corn. I think I sowed about 24 seeds, but I ended up with three. That's part of gardening, I'm afraid. You win some, you lose some. So I had three sweet corn. The pumpkins were doing very well. I was actually harvesting some of the leaves. They're very tasty if you haven't tried pumpkin leaves. Super tasty. On the other side, in the raised beds, things were looking a bit bare. In the back raised bed, I had interplanted my tomatoes when my garlic was still there, and I think I had two or three that made it. Usually, snails do not eat tomato seedlings, but this year it was just one of those years where they were eating everything in sight. But yes, my tomatoes were growing. By late summer, my tomatoes from my volunteer plant were ready to harvest and I was harvesting them regularly. The border was still looking gorgeous and the blueberries were turning and changing color, ready for autumn. I've mentioned this in previous videos. I think blueberries are just such a wonderful purchase because not only do you eat the tasty blueberries, but you also get the color and the foliage, which is just stunning throughout the summer really until they actually lose their leaves in winter. By mid-September, my cherry tomatoes were ripening and I was able to have quite a few salads. Additionally, I had made the decision now to take out the lavender. I just decided that I needed to plant it in a better place. So I did move it and it went to a sunnier position, but that left some room that needed to be filled. So this time, with the idea of right plant, right place, I did do some research and I decided in the end to buy some meadow rue or Thalictrum delavai. So I bought some Thalictrum delavai because it apparently likes clay soil and it doesn't mind a bit of shade. So I brought it there and you'll see how well it did in the future videos. So my border was looking really different because the lavender was out. My peonies were changing color. I didn't mention this earlier, but I had propped up my mystery plant because I decided to grow it into a tree and to see what would happen. But yeah, I was still getting geranium flowers. My tomatoes in the border, they were coming up as well. And my sweet corn was coming on strong. Actually, I think by this point I'd already harvested it, you know. In the back border, I had some Alyssum still looking good. My dahlias since May still flowering, and I had planted some primroses so that they could fill out the bed because it was a bit on the empty side. My spinach in the raised trough was coming along nicely. The lavender was being eaten, but nothing strange there. And my primroses were starting to bloom. In addition to the Thalictrum delavai, I also bought some grasses, two grasses. I thought it would be good to add something new in the garden. I also bought some hukras and some more blueberries. I also so many alsos. I also bought a hebe. This time it was a bit different. It was a Mrs. Winder. I was buying some of these because I wanted things that would still have structure in the winter. Because as I mentioned in the previous winter video, I didn't have much growing in terms of evergreens. So I really wanted to top up the evergreens in my garden, particularly in the form of the hukras. In terms of blooms, I had alyssums that were blooming wonderfully in the back raised bed. I also had dahlias that were still blooming well. I had color from the blueberries, as I have mentioned, and my pelargoniums, the geraniums, they were also producing a lot of color. One plant I haven't mentioned is my fuchsia. Well, fuchsias, there are two of them. They actually came back. So I initially grew them in 2022 and they did not make it in 2023. So I had to plant two others. But then in 2023, they blossomed beautifully, and then in 2024 they came back and they were just looking amazing. Summer is such a beautiful season with all the blooms. That's it for the summer season. Thank you all for joining me and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.